Hi friends, welcome back to Rafting Magazine, and today we are going to be talking about how to pack dry bags as a system and not just take one bag, throw everything in there, and then throw it on the river. You don't want your bags to get all filled with sweaty, wet gear, and you really want to partition your stuff out. So we want to think of it as a dresser and not like one just giant bag we're going to throw in everything into and it's going to make a mess. So let's start with our smallest bag first. We're going to use this small bag and we're going to take all our toiletries. So we got some laundry soap, we got some wipes, toothpaste, toothbrush. We're going to put that in there. Ladies, if you have some feminine hygiene products, you can throw those into this small bag. And I would actually recommend having a second one, and Kaylee is going to talk about that in a different video. But you see, if I just roll it down, it's going to get all filled with air. So you don't want that, because once we get all into more dry bags, if you have the small dry bags filled with air, it's going to be impossible to stuff them all. So we're going to take that, roll it up, and we're going to set that aside. Next up, we're going to take our clothes bag. I'm going to take a smaller dry bag. This would just be for an overnight trip or maybe a 2-3 day kind of trip. I'm just going to take a small amount of clothes. And what we want to do is we want to take the items that we are going to use the least and put them on the bottom. So I've got some camp socks here or some spare socks. I'm going to put those at the bottom because I'm going to use those the least. But when I get back to camp, I'm going to want to use a lot of my top layers and maybe a fleece or something like that. So I'm gonna put that on the top, but I'm gonna keep filling. I'm gonna take my spare shirt, put that in the bottom. Then I'm gonna take this nice little vest. I'm gonna kind of fold it up a little smaller. And then I'm gonna put that in. And then finally, I'm going to take this fleece layer and I'm gonna put that in, because when I get back to camp, if I get back to camp late or we show up and the first thing I wanna grab is something that's gonna keep me warm, and if it's a cold day, I especially wanna bust that out real quick. Just make sure I stay warm when I get back to camp, trap in all the heat. We're gonna lock that up, set that aside. Next, we're gonna take another dry bag, and I'm gonna put my sleep system in it. So I've got a bunch of ultralight stuff from Sea to Summit here, and I'm gonna take this. I'm gonna first start with my sleeping bag. That's going to be the last thing I'm gonna put in, because as I'm pulling my sleep system out, I'm gonna wanna pull it out in the order that I'm gonna set it up. So sleeping bag goes in first, then I'm gonna take my pillow and my bag liner, and these are also these things are a little bit larger, but still having some of this ultralight stuff from Sea to Summit is pretty cool. But I'm gonna take my sleeping pad, and this is a real small one. A lot of people will use Paco pads, things like that, but if you just want an ultralight system, maybe I'm taking the small 10-foot boat, I'm gonna wanna take this smaller one and maybe not like a huge sleeping pad to sleep on. So I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna put it in first. And the reason is I'm gonna set my tent up, and I'm gonna wanna pull this out first, inflate my air mattress, then inflate my pillow, pull my sleeping bag out, and then put my liner in it. So I'm gonna try to get all the air out of this. It's a little oblong, so we're gonna try and fold it down as nicely as we can, and then clip that together so we can set all that aside. Last thing, I'm gonna take one final dry bag, and I'm gonna put everything in this dry bag. So I'm gonna start probably with some of the most bulky items, or even the items that I can kind of pad out a little bit. I'm gonna take my clothes and I'm gonna put them at the bottom, because I don't want my tent to be poking around. So I have this tent. I'm gonna try and slide it in the middle of the dry bag. In this case, it's not really gonna work so well. So on one side of this tent, there's some poles, and then there's the tent itself. So I'm gonna take the tent wall, I'm gonna put that up against the wall of the dry bag and make sure the poles are in the middle. Then I'm gonna take my sleep system, and I'm gonna slide my sleep system right next to it. That way those tent poles aren't poking around. They're not gonna put a hole in the dry bag, and they're not gonna cause me any problems and cause this thing to leak. Then I can finally take my toiletries, I can put it on top. I'm probably gonna be using those quite a bit, especially when I'm coming in and out of camp. I can just pop my dry bag open, grab my toiletries, use those, or if I'm about ready to go on the river, I wanna brush my teeth before I go down. You know what they say, clean teeth, clean lines. So you brush your teeth and put all those toiletries away, roll your dry bag down, clip it up, and you're ready to go. Everything you need for 2 to 3 days on the river packed away in this whole system, you got a whole kit, and if this dry bag has something that gets breached in it, you know, you hit a stick or an oar frame or something like that breaks, goes through this thing, as long as this is the only thing that gets penetrated, you're good to go. Your tent can get wet, it can always dry out, it's not a big deal. Everything else you want, your sleeping bags, you want your clothes, you want everything else to stay dry. So there's a ton of low-cost dry bags out there, and we don't have to do like they did in the old days where they would take trash bags and throw trash bags in there, and then you got trash bags lying around, and it's just kind of a pain. You can use reusable bags that are designed for the river and have a great membrane that's going to keep the water out, unlike a trash bag where a little tiny stretch or a little tiny pinhole or something in the manufacturing, or even pulling it out of the box, can put a hole in it, and then all your stuff keeps getting wet regardless. So partitioning everything out into its own individual spot is going to save you a lot of time and a lot of energy on the river, because when you get to camp, you can open this up and say, well, I need to set up my tent first. I reach in here, pull out my tent, set up my tent first, pull out my sleep system, set up my sleep system, and then everything's ready to go. I can start eating dinner, cooking, whatever I need to do, and keep going down the river. And this is going to be the same for any of your other stuff that you're going to take on the river, from first aid kits to any of your cookware, things like that. You're going to want to pack it together into a system that kind of comes out like a nesting doll. So if you have some questions on this, drop those below, and we'll see you downriver.